The first ever video game console, the brown box, was made in 1967. It was made by the U.S. military and considered top secret. There were 4 switches on the front of the console and programming cards which showed the user what switches would need to be in and up or down position to play certain games. The brown box came with games such as Pong, Checker, and a few sports games. It wasn't until 1972 that the brown box lost its classified status and was sold to Magnavox. Magnavox made a few cosmetic changes, changed the name to the Magnavox Odyssey, and released the first ever home console open to the public. For the first time ever, as the Odyssey's manual said, with Odyssey, you participate in television. You are not just a spectator. The 1975 Telegame is the next console on the list. It wasn't a majorly popular console, but it was almost an exact replica of the Atari 2600 with the Sears name that became a major hit in 1977. The Atari 2600 was the first major console to have interchangeable cartridges to play games, rather than having to stick to games pre-programmed into the system. Interestingly enough, there were only 6 games available for purchase when the console came out. Luckily, they had a huge amount of third-party support, allowing for even more games to be created for the console. The Intellivision console, released in 1979 by Mattel Electronics, had much better graphics than the Atari 2600 and was a console owned for sports. It was released in stores such as Sears and Radio Shack with different names to expand the console's reach. The disc controllers, although great for sports games, weren't good for many other games. It also didn't help that Atari had bought as many game licenses as they could get their hands on. They could not get their hands on them. The Nintendo Entertainment System, commonly known as the NES, was released in the US in 1985 and in Japan in 1983 under the name of Famicom. It was an 8-bit console, but was originally created in the hopes that it would be a 16-bit console that could function as a computer. However, Nintendo decided to build a simpler cartridge-based system in the end. The NES was a major hit due to the video game crash of 1983 occurring 2 years prior, in which many US-based companies went bankrupt and people feared the industry was dying out until the NES was released. In 1989, the Sega Genesis came out in the hopes of challenging the so popular NES, and though it never really caught on in the US, it was a massive hit in Europe and Brazil. To do so, the Genesis took massive steps, becoming the first true 16-bit gaming console. The name Genesis was the first console to be named after a book of the Bible, as a representation of bringing a new age into home consoles, and it surely did. Although the console wasn't truly 16-bit, since the CPU was still 8-bit, although it had a 16-bit graphics card and was a major step into the consoles we have today.
In 1990, the Neo Geo was released, bringing the true power of the arcade systems to home. It featured the typical joystick, a select and start button, and 4 large buttons. It was known for its ability to produce amazing sounds and generate large numbers of on-screen objects without lagging. It was also the first console to use memory cards, with the idea that the user could bring their memory cards with them to the arcade, since they were designed to fit those systems as well. In addition, Neo Geo used the large size of their games to attract people's attention by placing the amount of megabits right on each cartridge, with some reaching over 350. Neo Geo was known for purposely using longer codes to avoid shortcuts in order to attract customers. But all these amazing features came at a price that prevented it from catching on. With a $600 price tag and games costing up to $200, it wasn't an affordable decision for most gamers. It lacked any major titles, so the games that did sell well were mainly one-on-one fighters and over-the-top sports titles. A year later, Nintendo released its Super NES console. The 16-bit console was not as successful as its predecessor, but it still proved to be widely popular, coming in second place just behind the Sega Genesis. The Super NES was released with better graphics, different controllers, better sounds, and more features than the NES. However, its success can only be attributed to the large amount of classic video games hosted on the console, such as Donkey Kong, Super Mario Bros., Zelda, and more. The true era of today's gaming starts to emerge in 1995 with Sony's PlayStation. With Sony claiming it to be their most important product since the Sony Walkman, the console was the first with 3D graphics, a huge element allowing a whole new degree of gameplay. Because of these 3D capabilities, Sony said they had to spend a large amount of time redesigning the controller to work best with the all-new system. The extended handles were designed to give the user more control, and 2 bumpers were added to the shoulders of the controller, expanding the amount of buttons on the remote to 8. It was also capable of linking to another PlayStation, so friends could now play against each other. There are also many add-ons that can be used with the console, including a mouse, memory card, second controller for purchase, and much more. It was first launched in Japan in 1994, but when released in the US in 1995, over 100,000 consoles had already been pre-ordered across the US. The retail price was $299 and launched with 17 available games. The following year, the Nintendo 64 was released. Nintendo had skipped the era of 32-bit consoles and jumped straight into a 64-bit console with their new release. They made an interesting choice of choosing cartridges over CDs, but defended their decision, saying that cartridges were more practical and CDs had long load times. There's also speculation that Nintendo would be able to complete the console and have it on shelves in time, but they did, and once the users had the ability to play it, the Nintendo 64 became a huge hit with Nintendo, selling over 300 million consoles worldwide. In 2000, Sony released an updated PlayStation console and named it the PlayStation 2. It was a huge success for Sony for many reasons. Sony had promised full backwards compatibility, so all games purchased for the original PlayStation would work on the new console, and Sony even promised full hardware backwards compatibility. What really caught the attention of customers was the built-in DVD player so that people could play games as well as watch movies on the popular growing form of a DVD. It went to break the record for the most consoles ever sold, reaching over 100 million by 2005.
In November 2001, the Nintendo GameCube was released and was a massive hit. The 128-bit console was surprisingly powerful for its small size and was even more powerful than the PlayStation 2. GameCube is focused on gameplay and graphics, hoping to make gaming playable for everyone. Like the Nintendo 64, the GameCube had 4 ports for controllers, and the controllers were similarly shaped to those of the Nintendo 64. The Game Boy Advance could also be connected, and games could interface between the two consoles. Also in November of 2001, Microsoft got into the home gaming industry with the original Xbox, one of the most powerful pieces of hardware in the industry at the time. It boasted an 8GB internal hard drive and a powerful custom-made processor. The Xbox now allowed users to play online through Xbox Live. One of their biggest hits with this new technology was Halo. The production of the Xbox was stopped after their partner Nvidia canceled the production of their processor. Over 24 million consoles were sold before production was discontinued.
In the same year of 2005, Microsoft unveiled its brand new console named the Xbox 360. This took gaming to the next level as consumers were astonished at the movie-like graphics of the console. It was also capable of surround sound thanks to the 3 processors and 20GB hard drive. The console was released in hopes to outperform its soon-to-be rival, the PlayStation 3. The PlayStation 3 was released in November 2006, hoping to beat out the competition with its variety of features. The PlayStation, like its predecessor, continued with its backwards compatibility movement, giving the PlayStation 3 the ability to play games from the PlayStation 2 and 1. Similar to the PlayStation 2's ability to play movies, the PlayStation 3 could now read Blu-ray discs. The PlayStation 3 had the capacity to store up to 54 gigabytes of data. The Nintendo Wii was said to have been in the planning since the unveiling of the Nintendo Cube. It was a massive hit, selling more units than the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 at the time. It featured controllers that could recognize 3D motion and be used to point at the television screen. The Wii lacked in graphics and failed to include HD capacity. Nintendo stood by this decision, knowing it would help keep the price of the games lower. The console had Wi-Fi capabilities and could read DVDs with internal systems. The Xbox One is an 8th generation home video game console developed by Microsoft. Announced in May 2013, it is the successor to Xbox 360 and the 3rd console in the Xbox family. The console placed an increased emphasis on cloud computing as well as social networking features and the ability to record and share video clips or screenshots from gameplay. In August 2016, Microsoft released a refreshed Xbox model, the Xbox One S, which had a streamlined design and native support for 4K video playback. The PS4 is also an 8th generation home video game console developed by Sony Interactive Entertainment. It offers improved buttons and analog sticks and an interactive touchpad, among with other changes to the controller. The console also supports high dynamic range, color, and playback from 4K media.